Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're all well and safe during these uncertain times. I'm Yasmin Omari, Executive Director for the Pearl Initiative, and I'd like to thank you for joining us today for our webinar on Gulf businesses beyond COVID-19, shaping new realities, the fourth in a series that we are holding in collaboration with the Global Compact Network UAE and the World Green Economy Organization. Before I delve into the theme for today's webinar, I'd like to take this opportunity to provide a brief overview of the Pearl Initiative for those of you that aren't familiar with us, and we'll hand over to Rachel in a moment to introduce our collaborating partners. Developed in cooperation with the United Nations Office of Partnerships, the Pearl Initiative was launched in September 2010 at the United Nations headquarters in New York. The Pearl Initiative is the region's leading independent non-profit organization committed to supporting the private sector to proactively take a lead in adopting higher standards of corporate governance, transparency and accountability in order to enhance business competitiveness and value creation. With its growing network of partner companies, the Pearl Initiative is committed to driving collective action, exhibiting decisive leadership and sharing of knowledge and experience to positively influence regional businesses and student communities. About today's webinar, crisis management for institutions often starts with an evaluation of any impacts, followed by mitigation processes. However, it is also essential for institutions to revisit their company cultures and see if formal and informal processes are equipped to rise to the challenge. This is particularly important in the present, seeing as how the COVID-19 pandemic has led nearly every business to adapt internal processes in order to continue operations. So how can institutions manage working through a crisis by reworking their culture in a time of rapid change? In a conversation with leading Gulf business representatives, we'll evaluate what Gulf region institutions are doing to manage the current crisis, understand the necessity of changing an institution's culture and practices during times of crisis, also offer solutions for companies and their leaders to try new strategies to revitalize their company cultures for resilience during crisis. I am pleased to introduce our expert moderator and panelists for today, who represent a wide range of Gulf organizations. Starting with our moderator, Mahela Nina is founder of Concerto, the Impact Company. Mahela, the Impact Company, TIC, is a boutique sustainability strategy and impact communications advisory firm. Prior to her current roles, Mahela has been for more than a decade dedicated to building growth strategies across a wide spectrum of levels and support organizations steer away from the current business as usual paradigm. With a passion for impact and triple bottom line, Mahela is the host of the Impact Talks and engages in public speaking, moderating panel discussions, and writing for publications which have an aim in changing the narrative around sustainability. Thank you, Mahela. Our panelists for today are Fatma Al Nabouda, General Manager, Sustainability, Saeed Mohammed Al Nabouda Group, Sani Riyad, Sales and Marketing Manager, Middle East and Africa, Johnson Controls, and Kyle Wagner, Head of Operations, Madar Farms. Introducing Fatma. Fatma Al Nabouda is a third-generation Al Nabouda family member and first female family member to take a role within the family business. The General Manager of Sustainability for the Saeed and Mohammed Al Nabouda Group, Fatma drives sustainability as one of the group's key strategic objectives and chairs the group's Sustainability Committee and Sustainability Leadership Council. Fatma started her current role as General Manager Sustainability in 2016. Prior to this role, she spent 8 years at Al Nabouda Real Estate Investments, progressing into the role of Deputy CEO in 2014. Fatma describes her progressive leadership approach as a catalyst for transformational change. Looking ahead, she aims to place Al Nabouda as one of the leading family businesses in sustainability in the region. Thank you, Fatma, for participating and giving up your time today. Second panelist for today is Sani Riyad. Sani is a Sales and Marketing Director for the Middle East and African region at Johnson Controls, with more than 15 years of experience on a broad variety of businesses and market segments. With a strong results-oriented commercial and operations background, Sani has very strong experience in the building technologies and solutions industry and has taken on leadership roles in finance, services, and sales throughout his career. In his current role, Sani is responsible for sales cycle support and the successful execution and implementation of initiatives towards business communities. Finally, last but not least, our third panelist for today is Kyle Wagner. Kyle grew up in an agricultural region of Pennsylvania in the northeastern part of the US, where he earned his Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from Pennsylvania State University. Having lived and worked in 6 countries since graduating, Cathal has amassed valuable experience in operations management in the demanding field of aerospace manufacturing. And now, as the head of operations for Moderator, he is focused on bringing consistency and quality to all farming facilities. Once again, thank you all to our panelists for the time today. The panel today is set up to be a conversation between the moderator and panelists, and we will set aside 15 minutes at the end of the discussion for questions for the participants as viewers. As with all our webinars, we do like them to be as interactive as possible, and we invite you to ask any questions you may have pertaining to the topic during this session using the platform's Q&A tool, which you'll see to your right on your screen. The panelists will dedicate the last 15 minutes of the session to answer them. I will now hand over to Rachel Paneno, who will give you a brief overview of the UN Global Compact local network in the UAE, as well as World Green Economy Organization, our partners supporting the delivery of this panel here today. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Yasmin, for the introduction, and thank you to the participants for joining the session today. By way of a really quick introduction, the World Green Economy Organization is a multi-stakeholder organization consisting of platform members from cities, public sector authorities, private and financial sector companies, academic institutions, and youth programs, all of which are engaged in green economy related practices, activities, and issues. The organization seeks to promote the widespread acceptance and increased importance of green economy in the context of sustainable development and poverty eradication. With regards to the Global Compact Network, it's now hosted by the World Green Economy Organization. The local network aims to mobilize the UAE's private sector to align to both the UN Global Compact's 10 principles and the SDGs through various programs, task forces, and activities in relation to key priority areas. Facilitating the collaboration and communication between businesses and non-businesses, the local network looks to provide a platform for dialogue to occur. I would now like to pass on to Michaela to start the session, and I really am looking forward to the interesting discussion between our speakers today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yasmin and Rachel, for your kind introductions. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today. And I would also like to extend a very warm welcome to our guest speakers as well as to our attendees. I'm very much looking forward personally to our discussion, and I'm sure that it's going to be very insightful. Now, I know that Yasmin has already mentioned this, but as with all the other sessions, we really aim to make this as interactive as possible. So please, to all the attendees, do drop your questions, insights, perspectives into the question box, as well as do take part in our polls throughout today's session. So now, really, I'd like to delve straight into the topic because the crisis that we've been facing over the past 6 months has put an unprecedented impact both on the society and on the economies, and with it has challenged tremendously every single business and every single individual globally. So we were really forced to rethink resources, business models, processes, and we kept on reinventing how we do business. And with it, of course, we significantly had to change our organizational cultures. So over the following 40 minutes before we go to the Q&A session, what I would really like us to do is to take a deep dive into practical insights, lessons learned, as well as perspectives from our 3 guest speakers. And I think that what is great is not only that we have 3 different sectors, industries, footprint companies represented, but also the fact that each single guest speaker is essentially representing also a different function. So with this in mind, I would like to turn first to Fatima and kickstart the conversation by asking her to provide us with an overview on how has the institutional culture changed over the past 6 months at Said and Mohammed Al Naboodah Group. What have been some of the new processes that have been implemented as a response to the crisis? So Fatima, over to you.
Thank you very much, Michaela. So at Al Naboodah, there were a lot of various best practices that we have adapted across the group. The most important one relates to the adoption of agile project management approach. Now, when you think of agile methodology, it usually applies to smaller teams working on specific projects. However, by applying it to a large organization such as ourselves with thousands of employees, and operating in different sectors, it actually has reduced the time for critical decision making. How did we do this? We did this by forming something called the Rapid Response Team on the onset of the crisis. So I'm talking about back in February. So the objective of this Rapid Response Team was to protect the health and safety of all our employees and to ensure that our operations to ensure the maintenance of operations throughout the crisis. The RR team, just a small description, it brought together individuals representing different interests from across the group. So this gave us an opportunity to have increased interaction and collaboration amongst the teams on a daily basis. It helped break down our objectives into more manageable tasks tackled in a short amount of time. It also enabled us to adapt to change rapidly and deliver work fast by learning as we moved forward, and we also solved problems in real time. To give you specific examples, we created a well-defined plan to protect the health and safety of our employees and our overall stakeholders. So everybody did the working remotely, the protective gear, masks, gloves, dispensers. What we also did was we've actually suspended our biometric clocking system and started using face recognition, whether in projects or internally in our offices. Another important example that we used is the utilization of electronic signatures and electronic transfer of documents. Another example is to keep our one of our objectives is to keep our operations running during the crisis. We've actually identified critical employees within the company that have certain expertise that without them we would not be able to run certain parts of our operations. Another thing is again part of continuing our operations during the crisis is identifying critical jobs that needed to carry on day-to-day activities. It was also important that we engage with our key suppliers. So if there was any disruption throughout our value chain, we had to make sure that we can find alternatives and solutions for that. Now, most importantly, we created something called the outbreak response plan that included when and how to activate it. As you know, we employ over 10,000 employees that work in close proximity. So having an outbreak response plan was very important for us. We have also established a strategic communication protocol that is based on truth and reality to inform all our employees of what's happening around us. One more important example or best practice that we have also created was a dashboard with real-time data that also included a trend analysis. So this dashboard included categories of all the resources that we're using across the group, and how much resources do we have left. And it also maintained a clear visual on infected cases. So we knew that COVID-19 is going to spread, it's airborne, and it's going to spread fast. So the only way we can lower its spread is to be able to have proper or correct real-time data with us. So this dashboard had, for example, the number of positive cases, the number of recovered cases. We also had information on how many isolation rooms do we have, how many observation rooms do we have, for example, at our employee villages. We also the final example that I'm going to share with you right now is we actually digitalize most of our processes internally within Al Nabooda. So these are just a few examples of what we have done for in terms of best practices during the past few months.
Thank you, Fatima. And I think that if there is any area that surfaces the immediate attention towards the processes, towards making them efficient, the employees, and maintaining their safety, as well as being transparent about what's happening within the company. And I know that you have so many other examples to reflect upon because the group operates across multiple sectors. And of course, I think that if there is any area that really surfaces is that there is no one size fits all approach into how each company should go about crisis management. And as we were discussing yesterday as well, even if our crisis management processes have been very thoroughly thought through, the current pandemic has really caught us off guard and basically pushed us to transform and accelerate this transformation as fast as we could in order to navigate the crisis. So now, Sani, I'm going to turn to you from the perspective of an organization that employs over 100,000 employees, is spread globally, and also is over 130 years old. So a lot of history there as well. So maybe we can get also your insights on these two areas related to the adaptation to working throughout COVID-19. What have been some of the new practices that you've implemented in general in the organization, but also in particular in the very dynamic function that you're leading in sales and marketing?
Sure. Thank you, Mihaela. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. So we as Johnson Control are mostly actually operating in the building efficiency and technology. So as a company, our first focus actually at the start of this pandemic was mainly how can we utilize our own products to serve our customer better, but at the same time, how can we keep our employees safe and healthy? So one of the key things actually that we were mainly actually focusing on was how can we utilize those products. So we have a lot of products actually that would help us actually with that space. So a lot of focus on the air quality. So we have a lot of products when it comes to the UV light. So we installed a lot of that actually into our own facilities, making sure that we make sure the air quality actually is at the right level. At the same time as well, we've been introducing within our organization and to our customers as well, our touchless experience. So all of the stuff from a face recognition to like a voice recognition, how can you like access everything without touching it? So this has been like phenomenal with the experience of our employees within our own facilities. And then the last one as well with our own products is how can we utilize the remote monitoring center? So at this point of time, actually, I think there has been for the last couple of years a lot of like focus on the technology or the cloud-based or remote connectivity products, and I think through that pandemic it showed everyone that like whoever was connected get the better service or get the faster service as well. So we've been utilizing that massively when it comes to the remote monitoring center. So now we can see all of our products at the customer site without even having to go there. Again, for everyone to know, so when it comes to control, security, HVAC or fire, they are all essential like electricity and water. So we need to make sure we can serve our customers from a remote site as well during the pandemic, so we don't have to be on site to do that. So that's actually from that space. One of the things as well that was our key challenge was the cybersecurity. So putting all of those employees at home, making sure that they all work. So the load on the VPN, the load on the cybersecurity, a lot of phishing emails throughout the company. So that has been like one of the key things that the company has been focused on centrally throughout our corporate office back in Milwaukee. So this is the things actually that the company was thinking of. I think one of the key things as well that helped us a lot during that was the business continuity plan. So there was a crisis management team that was developed on the spot. This team actually reported directly to our VP GM for the region. So they collect everything. So they build the business continuity plan, and that goes from like strategy to mitigation. You implement, you test, you sustain, you bring KPIs up to the VP. So for a faster decision, making sure as well, all of that actually like on an hours basis, because it's like a firefighting situation for us. Like, so every day you're facing something within the region. So today, like here, tomorrow's there, and everything actually is like as dynamic as it can be. So it can't be static. It has to be like super dynamic actually with the response as well, and how fast we can react to that. I think the last piece I will touch on is that we see very beneficial during that time was the clear communication. So on a weekly basis, we get a letter from the VP GM of the region stating exactly what's going on. Remember, our employees are back home. They talk to their managers or their manager's manager or to their peers, but they don't know what's happening across the organization within the region. That letter has been like really beneficial to calm people down and comfort them through the first, I would say, 2 months with the lockdown. That was the critical, I would say, 2 months, and that actually like was very well received. Communication is a key for a success actually of any organization, and I think Johnson Control had did a good job during this pandemic. So those are our key focus, I would say, during the first 2-3 months, and I'll give it back to you, Mihaela.
Thank you, Sani. And I think that you've touched upon a very important point, which is with the speed that everything has been changing, and especially in the first few months of the pandemic, we really need to act fast. And what we've seen globally actually is that transformation that has happened within a matter of weeks, rather than, you know, implementing processes which would probably take us even years to implement. So I think that accelerated even digitalization, the perception about hybrid working and so on. Now, Kyle, I'm turning to you because agility is one of the values which underpins the corporate culture at Mother Farms, and also innovation is essentially at the forefront of your business model. So maybe you could reflect on this, and how have these supported your approach towards crisis management during these times of rapid change?
Sure. Thank you for the introduction, Mihaela, and thank you as well to the Pearl Initiative for launching this webinar today. So first, a quick overview of who Moderator Farms is, because we don't have, quite unfortunately, the name recognition of somebody like Johnson Controls just yet. We are a very small organization, around 14 people, but we're here founded in the UAE, exactly for this reason of increasing food security, increasing sustainability, and decreasing the carbon footprint of all those imported fruits and vegetables that we enjoy every day. So as a very small team, we're in a very different position when such a crisis emerges like this. Yes, it would have been great to have the business continuity plans in place and this and that, but a small organization is much more about being reactive. It's very much a kind of survival mode, especially in those early months and years until the company gets to a certain critical mass where we can have this supports in place. So for us, strangely enough, the onset of the crisis didn't really disrupt the day-to-day activities tremendously. But it did pause us to sit back and reflect on something, which is, in the short term, it caused a lot of pain for us. Just like any organization, there was a tremendous amount of disruption that came up. First and foremost was it basically eviscerated our sales channels almost overnight from 1 week to the next, as we were primarily delivering to hotels and restaurants. For those of you in the UAE who know that those businesses basically were forced to close down within a period of a week or two back in February. So that forced us to pivot very, very quickly and find alternatives for our sales channels, which we're able to do through online retail. And again, that's a trend we've seen here in this region too, right? We've seen that, people are not going to restaurants and going out to eat as much, and therefore they're ordering food at home. So we're able to jump into a new category and actually get a bit of a benefit from that. That's something we wouldn't have probably done so early in our development had it not been for the pandemic. Another part of our business that we're quite excited about is our education sector. So we've spent the majority of last year delivering some fantastic curriculum geared towards elementary school students here in the UAE, teaching them where their food comes from, how it's grown, and giving a bit of initial exposure to agriculture, primarily through hands-on learning. But again, that program, which last year seemed like a great idea, this year suddenly come February, we find out it doesn't work anymore because we can't have the kids in schools interacting with their hands and interacting with each other like we used to. So a number of these challenges did come up out of nowhere, but the thing we were able to reflect upon was that, the bigger issues in this region, again, around food and water security. So we are very optimistic about the longer term there. Coming back to how we operate as an organization, as a default position in a small company, we were very much web-based from the beginning. Home working was part of our culture. We were on Zoom long before the pandemic arose. Everything from our IT systems is all cloud-based as well, using Asana for online project management, et cetera. So again, it wasn't that massive shift in internal working culture, fortunately for us there. The last thing I'll say is, again, operationally, one of the cool things we have to think about is being a forward-minded organization, as the other panelists are here, is we've had a really robust plan in place operationally. And that was one of the strengths we had we could fall back on here. In the way we do our indoor farming in our company, and we have a very high standard of hygiene already in place. So when this pandemic came and suddenly people were getting dust masks, well, we already had those. You know, people start washing their hands, we've already been doing that. So the really encouraging thing for me was, even in a period of 2 or 3 months where we couldn't even go into the farms because we had to limit the interaction with the farm staff, after finally going back in 2 or 3 months later, things are perfect, no infections, the staff is healthy and happy and everything. So again, I think the message there being really, you know, having that foundation in place enables any organization, regardless of size, to be able to survive any such unforeseen circumstances.
Thank you, Kyle. Very valuable insights. And again, it goes back to the same point, which is every organization, regardless of its size and regardless of how agile it was, it's been impacted by this crisis. But yet again, really pivoting and looking at what can we do next, experimenting and adapting on the go. I think these have been some of the highlights over the past few months. Now, because we've been speaking about all this transformation, I'm also curious to hear from our attendees what's happened within their organizations over the past months. So with this in mind, let me just call our first poll. And if everyone can see it now, just let us know what has been the major transformation in your organizational culture. So I'll just leave this for a bit. Has it been remote working, perception, faster decision making, the flexibility of structures, more collaborative approaches, teams empowerment? So I see some of the answers are already coming in. Just giving it a few more seconds. And I am going to close the poll now and share the results of the screen. Very mixed. However, what is predominantly changed is the remote working perception. And we've seen that because many organizations, actually all of them, had to immediately send everyone to work from home, at least in the lockdown period. Faster decision making, more collaborative approaches, teams empowerment, flexibility of structures. Very interesting results. And I think that if we really were to pin down the common denominator for all of this to happen, is actually the crucial role that talent plays in making all this really go through. So with this in mind, what I'd like us to do is take now a deep dive into a function that has also been tremendously impacted, and that is human resource management. So on one side, we've of course needed to look into how do we make that transition to remote working, but on the other hand as well, some organizations needed to look into how they can entirely reskill their workforces. So maybe Sani, you could share your perspectives on this and how significantly human resource management has changed for you over the past months in areas such as onboarding, performance management.
Yeah, so I would say actually, so we have a program actually that the HR with the support as well of the management team have published out, I think 3 months ago, which is called the Journey to Our New Norm. So what we are facing here is this could stay for a while with us, like nobody know when this will end. So we call it the Journey to Our New Norm, and in there actually that we're focusing mostly on 3 key fundamentals: the employees, our operation, and the focus on our products as well. So from an employee focus perspective, we've been focused a lot on like good to have versus must have, and that's always like to drive the lean organization at a certain point. And I think as some attendees actually shared as well, less hierarchy when it comes to that. So definitely at this point of time, big organization or small organization need to start thinking about how can they be lean for them actually to maneuver all of those crises that's coming toward us. The second point as well, which is mainly driving on behaviors and cadence within your daily activities. So people are used to like wake up in the morning, get dressed, go to the office, they do their stuff. So now they wake up, they are still at home. There is other activities happening at home. Now with the Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatever the online tool that everybody's using. So we discussed that. I think is that mostly what's consumed most of our time on a daily basis is the small talks, and that's something actually that has been driving by the HR team, is that you have to slash down your meetings and be more efficient. So you need like a pre-populated agenda before you attend the meeting. The meeting needs to be precise. Nobody needs to attend that is not part of that meeting. So the small talks of how you say it back in the days when you were in the office, you can be on a phone call, having a conference call, but you can still ask someone that is walking around like, hey, can you do this for me? So this is becoming a meeting now. So if you think about that, this is where most of your calendar has been full now, back to back all day long. And this is, again, is not efficient. So we need some work-life balance, if you will. You still need to have your lunchtime. You still need to have your coffee. You need to have like 15-minute break between meetings. So this is the type of things that we're trying to drive as well, which is mainly the behavior, and at the same time as well, the discipline and the well-being of our employees. Couple of things as well about the employee focus. So we've been starting a campaign about the flu vaccination for the entrance of the winter. Again, this is an optional, it's not a mandatory thing, but the company is offering that actually for everyone to come forward with his family as an optional and get a flu vaccination to slow down the flu going to hospitals while you have a flu versus a COVID. So you slow down the pressure on hospitals as well within the country that you live in. So that's something that the company is trying to drive. So this is from an employee point of view. Again, from an operation point of view, we have a lot of things that's coming out, like virtual tracking of our assets and employees. So we have our smart cameras or location assurance that can share with you actually, like if there is 2 employees that are closer to each other by 2 meters, they can show you how many employees are on premises at all the time. So everyone is measured by the camera with the face recognition. So we know where our employees most of the time when they are in the facility itself. We categorize our employees into 3 categories. And then the first category is back in the office. Second category, we're still assessing and auditing the facility to see if they can be back in the office. We need to make sure that we're not in rush. We want to go back to the office. We definitely need to have the human touch back, but we need to be very cautious. We don't need any COVID impact or like any cases within the employees. We're tracking this on a daily basis. We have a tracker. This is one of the key things that we're trying to drive as well, is just, it's not how fast. We don't want to be a leader for going back to the offices as much as we want to be a follower when it comes to this. So we're waiting a little bit, but I think that the gradation or the division of who should be back from an efficiency point of view has been going well for us. The last piece for me, actually, I would say product focus, and that's from a sales and marketing. As like the sales team are out there offering the connected equipment as much as they can, because we need to make sure that going forward, in case of another pandemic or another lockdown, or God will, you never know, we need to make sure that all of our customers are connected as well for us to be able to serve them better.
Thank you, Sani. And indeed, it's very important to also think very thoroughly at the roles of those individuals, because at the end of the day, not all functions can be performed remotely, and some need to still be on site. So really maintaining that balance. And I like it that you've said that you've also basically categorize them into 3 main tiers: the ones that need to go back in the office, the one that can continue remotely, and so on. And touching on this, actually, there are many organizations which are still experimenting what's the best way moving forward in terms of a hybrid working model. How much percentage should go back in the office, how much percentage should be spent remotely at home or in a co-working place, whatever it is. Now, again, what has been surfacing as well is an area that you've pointed out very well too, which is the fact that while working remotely, we might lose that sense of belonging, those small interactions and the standards of behavior that actually underpin a corporate culture. So maybe Fatima, since Al Nabuda Group, for you, employee welfare is at the core of your sustainability principles. And also I know that the group has won the first position in UAE's happiest workplaces to work for. So maybe you can share also some of your perspectives and insights as to how should we go about, strengthening this social bonds, building a shared culture, and still maximize productivity in a hybrid working model.
Yes, for us at Al Nabuda, again, communication is key. For us to be able to increase and motivate our employees and keep their morale high, during every month we have something called the monthly sustainability update. So what we share internally, because communication is important again, we usually share our overall sustainability performance. When we do so, we also share information on the reality of the situation of the crisis that's happening around us, and also offer a message of hope. So we believe in transparency. It's one of our values, and when employees see this information, they realize that yes, there is a crisis, but somehow we are adjusting and we are adapting to this new normal, and it does a lot for their morale. And one example, it's also increased our employees' motivation and morale is alternate working weeks for through this means that people within the same team can work, but through alternate weeks. And this has actually showed an increase in the level of productivity and motivation. We've also introduced something that's a bit interesting. That it's not interesting, it's actually a good thing that we've done. This employees over the age of 55 were given an option, and we've actually advised them to work remotely. Employees with compromised immune system, we've also asked them to do so. Women, working mothers, also started working remotely. And this has also increased their motivation and morale. After engaging with also our insurance providers, what we managed to do is we managed to get free online consultations with no 20% co-pay for them. So this is something that we've done, and our employees' learning and development as well did not stop across the group. We've moved all our training into online platforms, which shows that yes, there is a crisis. Yes, things are not always. They are stressful and unsettling. Sometimes maybe a bit chaotic, but we're a 60-year-old company. Resilience is part of our DNA, and we are going to get through this. And we will support our employees, and we will stand by them in whatever they need and however we can support them. So that's it.
Yeah, 100%. And you know, that transparency that you've mentioned is crucial in supporting the team's trust, the company as well. Also looking at the individual specifics of each employee and how can we make everything better for them and safer for them, giving them the tools through online trainings. I think these all are great examples and definitely could be carried forward in a post-pandemic world as well. Now, Kyle, we were also speaking the other day about, you know, how crucial upskilling, reskilling is in being able to weather the storm more efficiently and continuously adapt on the go. So with this in mind, what do you think from your perspective have been some of the lessons learned throughout the pandemic in terms of this particular value, and how we can carry forward this continuous learning for our teams in a post-pandemic world?
Yeah, so it's a big question. So I think the short answer is working remotely has probably increased the amount of available information to many of us. I mean, this webinar is a great example. This is a way of communicating information that really wasn't the norm 6 months ago or 8 months ago, we can say. So I think it's been an opportunity for many of us to understand who is doing what are best practices elsewhere in the world. And on this call today, we're probably sharing information on multiple continents, hopefully, and getting some best practices out there. But again, then raises another question is, where do I draw that line between learning and working? Because it's great to obviously think about how am I, improving myself as an individual, as an employee of my company. But where does that line kind of be drawn between how much is just knowledge for fun and knowledge for business. I think, moreover, there's a wider reflection to be made here around, the kind of the macro questions of, where do we fit into society? What does society look like going forward as this has kind of rocked the global boat, so to speak? And I kind of reflect back at some of the first images that came out of the pandemic, back from the US where I'm from. You see these images online of people running to supermarkets and grasping for toilet paper like it's like it's water or the air they breathe. And we didn't see that here, but that was an effect of the panic that kind of set in initially. And I think luckily we can say here, the UAE again had that foresight, and they put in place, Minister of Food Security. They've had the foresight to plan ahead and ensure that supply chain risks never affected our shelves here. And I think many of us can say that we went to the supermarkets even back in March and April during the worst part of the thing, and more or less all the stuff was there we needed. I don't think anybody went hungry in this country, which is a tremendous testament to a country which is relying on so many food imports here. So I think it's been a really big win for the UAE, but it makes us think about all these complex interactions, how a virus that maybe starts in one part of the world, how quickly that can now spread, and how quickly those ramifications ignore international boundaries and social norms and everywhere else, and just wildly hits everywhere. So I think, to me, the question is really around, how can we as society, resist, looking in ourselves and closing up and actually collaborate more in a different way to help each other out.
And collaborations are definitely essential, and I think that this is a great lesson that the pandemic has taught us, and we've seen them happening cross-sector, cross-industry, within government, societies, in order to be able to essentially navigate the crisis and leverage our resources for the betterment of all of our stakeholders. Now, you've also touched upon the great leadership that we've had here in the UAE in terms of crisis management and not instilling that panic in the population. So maybe from this perspective, because Sani, you're part of an organization that spreads across multiple geographies, maybe you can elaborate what you have seen within the organization differing even within the region, but also outside the region in terms of crisis management processes, how businesses are structuring themselves, outlook, asset management. What have been some of the differences?
Yeah, definitely. So I think one of the things is so there is a common theme, as I mentioned at the start, which is mainly the business continuity plan or the crisis management team. And that has been customized depending on each and every city, because each city would behave differently. And I think, as we mentioned before, is the UAE was very proactive about their approach compared to other countries as well, but they weren't so proactive about their approach. And we see some factories on a shutdown, and we see some businesses actually on a complete lockdown with zero actually business going on. Still here during the pandemic, we still had business going on. So that was definitely a different proactive approach from the government, from the country itself compared to other countries in the area or in other regions. So, but however, actually one of the things that I want to mention is that one of the things that is very proactive that Johnson Control are working on is called the pre-mortem training, right? So we are trying to think about multiple scenarios, the pre-mortem training for our post-COVID essentials, right? So that's actually has been one of the key things that we're thinking about. So when you do a pre-mortem, you're trying to think about multiple scenarios, right? What if this happens? What should we do? What if this would happen, right? And then you're trying to put multiple scenarios about the essentials of the post-COVID time, right? You're talking about commercial buildings. Do you talk about remote employees? So if they are remote, do they need to be here or they need to be somewhere else? So we all can be actually based in Peru, if you will, right? And running countries everywhere, right? So now it doesn't matter where we are, and the pandemic just proved that we're all at home and we're all operating and we're all functioning. So this is the type of things actually that the companies will be looking at in the future, strengthening their technology, transforming their technology and their cloud base, making sure as well that we're all accessible. I think one of the key things as well is going to be a lot of savings when it comes to travel expenses. This is going to be a big thing for all of the companies. So now when you do a kickoff, you don't need to fly to South Africa or to Turkey or to Egypt. You can actually do it centrally from here, everyone behind the screen, and you can do your kickoff. So this is the type of things actually as well. But at the same time, we need to be cautious about that, because the human touch is going to be a key. That's the relationship. That's going to be the pillar, the main pillar that get people together. So we don't want to get back and get all technology and get all behind the camera, and then we forget the human touch and the relationship and building on that. So this is going to be one of the main fundamentals that the company will be thinking of. But I think that the main theme that we're looking at is mainly we're super focused on the organization health index. So that's part of our transformation. So we are measuring a 10 organization health index. That's part of our transformation. We're working with the McKinsey team on that, part of our transformation, which is mainly you're talking about role clarity, strategic initiatives, making sure as well that supportive leadership for the employees. So we are working on making sure that our employees are supported. Even through the pandemic, they are getting even more communication, transparency about what we're doing and what's the next steps and what's the post-COVID, how it will react and how this will impact our business and our new norm, if you will.
And indeed, being transparent, as we were saying earlier, plays a crucial role, especially in a hybrid working model. And also, just circling a little bit back to what you said about who the scenarios and who's going to still work remotely and who isn't and is going to mainly be in the office. Again, there is no one-size-fits-all approach, but I've personally heard of a great example from a very large organization which is planning to have a 50% mix of remote working and in-office working. And in order to be able to instill those collaborations and also to support their employees' shared thoughts, what they've done is they've completely redesigned their office as employees start returning back. So basically, they've removed all the cubicles, and what they are doing is putting it together into a more creative / co-working space style so that employees keep on communicating more and more while they are in the office, which I think is a fantastic example. But now circling a little bit back to some of the areas which we've touched upon, which basically really revolve around taking into consideration the needs of all of our stakeholders. Even you, Sunny, you've mentioned really looking at customers, looking at employees, Fatima as well, Kyle as well. You've all mentioned this, and essentially understanding our various stakeholders' needs is crucial and is also one of the principles of sustainability. So maybe just touching a little bit more in depth on this topic and how should we go about changing our institutional cultures or organizational cultures while taking into consideration our various stakeholder group needs. So maybe Fatima just elaborating on this a little bit. Fatima, we can't hear you. I think you're on mute. Done.
Yes, sorry. So for us, change management takes time. And in my experience, during a crisis, the fastest way to communicate this change is to be brutally honest. For us, I've explained earlier that we've established a communication protocol based on truth and reality to keep all our stakeholders informed and engaged. Protecting the health and safety of our employees is actually, and our subcontractors is actually, and overall stakeholders is actually a strategic objective of ours and has been so for the past 3 years. And we have already shared our safety plans about how to protect ourselves against outbreaks, about to stay safe with our subcontractors and our key stakeholders, the people that we work with in the various projects. Even pre-COVID, we have always been in constant and in consistent engagement with our stakeholders. By doing so, what happens is we build strong and meaningful partnerships that are built on trust. We also start to understand what it is that our stakeholders' challenges are and try to address them and work with them to create shared value for everyone involved. So it's quite important. I mean, before COVID, during COVID, and inshallah after COVID, constant engagement is key and communication. So.
Communication, transparency, absolutely. I fully agree. And it's really important to continue strengthening those bonds and seeing where can you support, where can your resources be leveraged in order to support suppliers, partners, etc. Now, I'm quite conscious that we start to run short on time, and just before opening it up to our virtual floor for a Q&A session, so please do start sending through questions so that we can direct them to the speakers today. I wanted to maybe get an overview from each one of you, that one area that you think is essential for any organization to address in order to navigate the challenges, to revitalize the cultures, and to essentially build resilience. So maybe Kyle, what would be that one point that you would really want to touch upon?
Great question. So I think it's 2 points, if I can sneak them in quickly. I think first and foremost is we need to become more comfortable with ambiguity and with lack of clarity. I think as much as all of us would love to have great plans and great strategies in place, unfortunately, nobody really knows what the next 6 to 12 months are going to look like. So I think as leaders of organizations and individuals, that's an immense challenge. And it really forces us to double down on our decision-making mechanisms we have in place. You know, we're taking decisions based on the best information today. Great, let's review it next week when the new information comes out. First and foremost, I think, how can we, make a change after the pandemic? I would say, coming back to my previous point, that I hope that we as society are not kind of looking inwards and closing up ourselves and kind of, reclusing into this, isolation bubble, but rather actually asking ourselves, how do we collaborate? How do we have a more meaningful, collaborative society on the other side of this, coming out of it? One meaningful action point I can say from those of us here is, think about buying local versus, buying something from the outside, especially when it comes to local produce, because that makes the other question of, where are we going to draw that line between sustainability, which is a long-term issue, and that short-term protecting health outcomes? And I think, to me, that's one of the concerns I have, is that, in the short term, we've lost a bit of focus on the bigger picture around climate change because we're focused on the more urgent issue of the health pandemic we have today.
Thank you, Kyle. And indeed important. Essentially, now everyone is really trying to get back that customer trust, customer traction as well. And then the long-term strategies, I think, is something that we will essentially start looking at now. Now, Sunny, maybe from your perspective, what would you advise any organization to look into first?
Yeah, so I would say actually the key 2 things that we would recommend actually is one, invest in your technology and cyber technology. Make sure as well that you're well prepared for the future. I think the future came earlier than what we expected when it comes to transformation of technology. And the second piece is invest in your people. Make sure that the well-being of your team is well in a good shape, because that's the investment actually that when we come on the other side, that will well pay off. So people, I think it's the main pillar for everything. So it brings everything together. It brings the products, the solutions, the partnership, the relationships, the work, everything is around people. So I think I encourage everyone actually to just focus on those 2. That would be my recommendation here.
Thank you very much, Sunny. And Fatima, we've started a conversation with you. We will end it on the same note with yourself. What do you think from your perspective?
Well, what I've realized throughout the crisis, a lot of businesses had to choose between, do we take care of our employees or do we take care of our bottom line? So is it social versus economic? From our perspective as a family business, the health and safety of our employees come first by protecting them, by taking care of their well-being and their livelihoods. We will continue as a business for generations to come. So people first.
People first. Thank you. Now, just opening it up to our virtual floor for some questions. We'll wait and see whether anything comes through. However, I would also like to kind of summarize all the areas that we've been discussing over the past 40 minutes, because I think that these are essential and really support us reimagine the way that we do business and reinvent our approaches moving forward. So basically, we've had a higher efficiency in terms of processes, making faster decisions. This is one of the essential areas that each one of you has mentioned. Investing in our employees, supporting them collaborate, and ensuring that we provide them with the right tools in order to be able to learn constantly, it is also essential, and of course ensuring that they are in safe working environments. And nonetheless, an area that you, Fatima, have highlighted very well too, and same Kyle, same Sunny, reimagine how we create that value for our stakeholders, and having them at the center of every decision that we take is crucial in order to also gain that competitive edge, because if we care about every single stakeholder that our business interacts with, that basically means activating our corporate purpose too. So I see that there are no questions coming through, and I know that we only have just a couple of minutes to go. So with this in mind, I'd really like to thank you for your contributions. I think it's been a fantastic discussion, and a huge thank you to our attendees as well for participating into our poll. And nonetheless, I need to also thank to the team at Pearl Initiative, the Global Compact Local Network, as well as the World Green Economy Organization for putting this event together. So really, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mihaela. Thank you for such an exciting discussion. And I know you've all given closing points and final remarks, but I think it's fair to say that companies have adopted best practices, manage risks, particularly with respect to human resource management across the region, to manage the critical decision making and facilitate smoother transition in the times of crisis. It's interesting to see the different perspectives, the family business perspective, along with the larger regional organisations, and the comparisons are quite interesting to draw. It's fair to say as well, some sectors are pioneering technologically advanced risk management initiatives and targeting aspects like air quality, remote employee engagement, environmental safeguards and product designs, and more digitization is an imperative now for all businesses. So I mean, good is coming out of times of crisis. We've only just accelerated the change that we needed to see happening anyway. And of course, all organizations, even agile ones, have had to change. How fast the pivot was and how open the company was to it is what moderated essentially the success of business in the current environment. So agility and flexibility to adaptation has been critical. Of course, company cultures have changed dramatically with things like remote working, faster decision making, and less rigid workplace hierarchies. However, the most important aspect and rises above all challenges is the need to empower teams in a turbulent period, which I think is fair to say our panelists here and their companies have successfully done, and it's a common theme that we've seen across the board. So thank you all once again for all of your inputs and your feedback, and being so open with us and sharing kind of what you've been doing with the organisation. It's really important for us to facilitate this dialogue and learn from each other and other organisations what everyone is doing. So thank you, and please do tune into our additional webinars that we're holding. We have been doing a significant number of webinars since the onset of COVID in place of our in-person events. These are all accessible on demand as well on our YouTube channel. So if you do miss any webinars you think might be interesting, or you might like to share this with another colleague, friend, all on our YouTube channel. So thank you so much and stay safe. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you to everybody who organized it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.